Welcome back to the State of Survival Dimension. Today we're going to be talking about DayZ, but this time we're going to be talking about one of its mods, actually a map mod that recently came out called Green County. But what makes you enjoy DayZ maps? Like, is it the landmass size? Is it the adventure? Is it the point of view interests? I really kind of want to know what actually makes you want to play another unofficial DayZ map.
I haven't really played any unofficial DayZ maps except for Green County, I don't think. Everything I've played has been official maps on DayZ. What I enjoy about switching maps though is the differences. Not only in the, topography and the points of interest, but also the conditions that you might run into. For example, we have um the what is it, Sakal, the frost map, the cold map, the really cold map in official DayZ. That was an interesting change for me from normal DayZ maps. And then Green County is its whole new thing. It's We weren't freezing to death. We weren't super cold all the time. I like those kind of environmental changes, I guess.
Nice. Yeah, I have to say, I always usually prefer official maps because when unofficial maps come out, I hate to say it, but a lot of times they're like early stages, but they're so early stages, you kind of like, after you get past the first point of interest, like maybe 1 kilometer in, everything else is pretty much not finished. And Green County didn't have that problem, I actually have to say. Uh, my first impressions of Green County was there's a lot of green. There's a lot of forest. There's a lot of terrain to have to go through. And, I'm going to say there's a lot of foliage. But, like that's the cool thing about this map was that it wasn't just another, there's a town every, half mile or half kilometer. And I really got to enjoy it because I actually never knew when there was another player in uptown or watching the town because there were so many little hills and valleys. It does take place in Ohio, and it's actually based off a real location called Greene County.
I really liked the way Green County was finished, like you're talking about. That's something that me and Red were running around and exploring and looking for when we were running through the woods. Is the terrain just kind of thrown together here? Do the trees look weird? Are they growing out of the ground the right way? That kind of stuff. And I mean, I didn't notice a lot of that. I honestly noticed less like terrain clipping through the ground and through buildings and stuff than I do in official DayZ maps. Um, that's It was a very good experience, especially for something that's new.
It's definitely middle of the road for me. The reason I say this is because I think it is a fun map. I'm really engaged with the 10 kilometer by 10 kilometer area, the large, vast forests in between the points of interest. But I think the map needs a little bit more, I think, love and assets. I know that it's not always easy to make your own custom assets, especially when it comes to a map of this size. But if the map maker could over time start introducing more American assets that don't look like the ones that we got on Shanaris, Shakal, or Livonia, I think that would really start to make the map truly start to stand out even more than it already does. Because we rarely ever get a halfway finished map, not to mention a full finished map that fully comes out on release. So I'll have to say middle of the road, borderline on good, right?
Speaking of roads, one plus for Green County for me too was I could actually read the road signs.
You can't read pictures dimension. We've talked about this.
There was words on those road signs. I don't know what you're talking about. And they weren't in Russian
No.
or whatever the languages of DayZ. I could read them. I could tell you guys
All
where I
right.
was at, okay?
Okay, speaking about the road signs, I have to say I think that was one of the negatives is some of the road signs would tell you that you're 0 miles from the place you're next to. And I think that's just like you would only know that if you've actually traveled through America, that like it says welcome to, but it doesn't like have a road sign like 500 feet behind you going, this city is 0 miles away. So, one of the general rules when it comes to gameplay design is I think it was coined with The Witcher 3, which is there's always a point of interest within 30 seconds around you. Now, Daisy is a survival game, and I believe the amount of time between interest points on like Shanaris is like a minute and a half to 3 minutes. It kind of varies like that. Whether you're finding a small shed in the woods or you're coming across a small hamlet or a house just randomly on the end of a dirt path, there's always a point of interest that you can come across in some of the official maps within that time frame, right? How did Green Hell's point of interest distance feel to you?
Honestly, it didn't really feel any different than my normal experience with DayZ. There was a lot of cross country running, a lot of running through the woods, a lot of running over up and over hills. But that to me is kind of DayZ. If you're not following a road or you don't know exactly where you're going, you're just kind of wandering around in the woods. When me and Red were playing together, we had a specific road we wanted to get to, and it took us a while to run cross country to that road. But once we hit that road, we noticed several POIs. And we weren't looking through the woods to find these little houses, these little game trails. But later on, I was playing and I did notice some of those things that we weren't really paying attention to. We weren't really looking for. I noticed some game trails kind of running around ponds, and I noticed more animals kind of in that area, or at least it felt that way. Like there were more animals in the area where I was at. I actually took a nice little hike in DayZ and followed one of those game trails for a while and followed all the markers and everything. It was a nice, pleasant little hike until I heard wolves again for like the fifth time.
I have to say the distance between the points of interest are kind of like what you described. If you don't know where you're going, it's going to feel like forever. But once you start to get a little bit of grasp of the map, looking for the hiking trails, the game trails, looking for like small other things that you can identify to figure out where you are, the points of interest became a lot smaller time gap to get to, and I really kind of enjoyed that. But I also enjoyed getting lost. Love that. Like there was not enough repetition in the map to be the same old same trees all the time, but there was enough of it that if you're not paying attention where you're going, you may think that you have gone in circles, but you really haven't. You just have gone off the path a little bit more than you needed to. I kind of enjoyed that feeling of like, if I don't know where I'm going, I don't have a compass or anything else, I can get easily lost in like this area of woods for quite a while. The points of interest themselves I mentioned, I would have to move on to that. Like I said before, I would like to see more American based assets. I know that's a very tough thing for a lot of map makers because it takes a lot of effort to make even buildings like a good 10 of them. Probably would take an average person, I don't know, probably a week to make all of those, maybe more depending on what your complexity you're going for. But the points of interest were fun. I like the storytelling. We talked about visual storytelling in Human Z a while ago, and in this map, you could see what was happening. Some of these towns looked like they were barely touched, and some of the other towns, you could see that the military was trying to set up there. There's a truck there. There's barricades. They have a medical tent going on. It looked like there was a story to see in a lot of the places, and I liked the changes to some of the buildings. But what do you think so overall?
Speaking of visual storytelling, I felt like there was a lot of military barricades and tanks in the areas where we were exploring, in the places we were looking at, a lot more than what I've experienced in DayZ official stuff. Now, again, I state this all the time when we talk about DayZ, and I'll state it again. I don't have a like plethora of experience like you guys do in DayZ, and I don't know all the towns and all the maps or anything like that. But to me, from my experience, it seemed like there was a lot more of that in the towns we were exploring. Specifically, I keep referencing me and Red playing, but specifically when me and Red got to one of the bigger cities, there was an entire street down this one city that was like military checkpoint barricades at one side and some tanks and some bigger guns, and then there were the metal train cars or shipping containers scattered throughout in the middle. And you walk down this long street like that. There was even like a, I don't even know what you would call it, but it was a two level platform you could climb up on, like a like almost like a watchtower, but it was kind of like, it wasn't a permanent structure. It was something the military had set up right then and there in the street. And you got down to the end of the street, and there was another barricade at the other end of the street. And it just, you could tell that that was some type of like checkpoint, some type of like flow through for people to get supplies, things like that. And it was interesting to see that in a big city, in the middle of that big city.
I think one of the things that I liked that actually our producer Red Falcon here just in a minute told me about, which is that there is furniture in some of the houses, in some of the attics, and some of the layouts of the houses, furniture wise, have been added to or changed a little bit. And I thought that was super cool. But Red, our producer here, was able to actually go to the secret bunker.
That's right. There's what's looks I was going around to all the different military areas to look for which ones were gassed, which ones weren't, that sort of thing, get a feel for it. I did find one that had this weird noise like I kept hearing, and I eventually kind of zoomed in on it and found the bunker, which was the bunker assets from Vanilla, and you could get into it. You didn't need a card key or anything special to get into it, and there was some special little rooms inside with some loot. That was like I said the before we started, the one as I was really looking for details to pick on. The one detail was that because it's a vanilla asset, the markings on it were in Cyrillic, not English. So I went, "Oh man, you made it this far." It was nice to have some very well laid out little military areas like that and secret bunkers with a noise that's going to lead you to it, kind of a Pied Piper type thing. And then going back to what Dimension was talking about with military checkpoints and blockades and stuff in that town, they did add some new things, which was instead of relying on military tents or things like that to be spawn points for the higher tier loot, they added these supply drops. So it was a bunch of boxes that indicated on the side like supplies or something like that, and they would spawn items on top of it, and it was higher tier loot and medical supplies. Even got some decent guns from there, so that was fun that they added those extra details.
I like that you speak about these kind of loot areas that, like, and it wasn't just the tents, it was these boxes and crates, because that brings up our next subject when we're talking about Green County is how was the economy? I thought the economy myself was pretty standard. It did have some little bit of changes like Red talked about, but I felt like overall the balance was okay.
The one thing for me about the loot economy in Green County was it didn't feel like certain things were spread out enough. Something that again me had read while we were playing, we were talking about, we weren't finding a lot of the like mundane loot that you find in vanilla DayZ spread throughout the map. We were finding more of it. As a matter of fact, it's kind of funny, we didn't find certain items until we got to the big city. We're walking through the woods trying to get to this big city, and we're talking about, oh hey, we haven't seen this item, we haven't seen that item, and we've been playing for this many hours, and we searched all this stuff. And then as soon as we get in the big city, we start finding some of those mundane items, some of the things that you don't necessarily need, but could be useful here and there. I don't know if that is a normal Daisy thing, but it seemed to me that some of that loot, some of the more mundane loots, even some of the tools weren't as spread out as some of the rest of the loot. We were finding guns like crazy. We were finding ammunition like we had so much ammunition in our pockets. We were throwing ammunition down because we couldn't carry anything else. But we weren't finding pickaxes and sledgehammers and things like that until we got to the big city.
Oh. Well, you know what? I have to say that medical supply wise, the only time I was ever able to find medical supplies was ambulances, crashed ambulances. They could open the doors, and inside of them, that's where all the medical supplies was. I thought that was a pretty cool detail. Like, I'm sure there are medical areas on the map, but I never found one. I only found these crashed ambulances that you could go into and get some of the stuff out of. The other thing I would have to say is I did play on the official Green County server myself for like a good couple of hours, and I had a hard time finding guns and ammo. I was finding, dresses to rip into rags, rope, a bunch of tools and other stuff. So I kind of had a reverse experience for you that you described. And I couldn't find a beanie. That's mundane, but I like my beanies. What can I say?
Well, and to clarify what Dimension was saying, we were running very basic guns. So I had a Sporter and a Mark II. So I had 22 ammo coming out of the kazoo, but I think we saw one Tundra and maybe a handful of 308 ammo. Some of the bigger guns I never saw Mosin,
Hmm.
things like that. So it was really like if you take the Chinaro's loot economy and then really drop it down several notches so that the tier 4 loot is almost unattainable, and tier 3 is very rare, and tier 2 is rare, and then tier 1 is kind of normal. That's what it felt like. And then there were the anomalies like the stupid sling bags. That there was some kind of glitch in the way that they had them spawning, and you'd go into those little food court trucks or whatever, and there was suddenly you see like 4 sling bags, and there was just sling bag city.
And as far as the ammo and guns go, we were also playing on a private server, so there was a lot more of that available for us to find than there was for you, Dump, when you were out in the public server. So like that was understandable. That made sense. It just also seemed weird to me that we weren't finding more of the other mundane stuff, more of the hand tools and stuff like that. That we were finding so many sling bags, so much 22 ammo, so many shotgun shells.
That's true. That is true. There was no
Uh,
shortage of shotgun ammo, 22 ammo, 22 weapons, shotguns. They were all over the place. But anything other than that, it was tough to find. And certainly, like you said, the tools you had to. They were really limited to the industrial areas. You were not finding sledgehammers and pickaxes and shovels very much at all.
I'll tell you something else we found a lot of that I don't know. I also don't know is if it's weird in vanilla. We found a whole lot of wolves. Red and I got attacked at the military base by wolves. We took those wolves out. We got to the big city. We got attacked by wolves, I think twice in that city. And then we got off. I logged back on a couple of hours later, immediately got attacked by wolves again in the same city, fought those wolves off, left. And in about an hour after I left the big city, there's wolves howling behind me again.
the wolves just wanted you, man. You
I don't
want to be
know.
a part of the pack in their bellies. But no, quick tip, folks. If you log out inside wolf territory and log back in wolf territory, you're going to get wolves. But water. I had such a hard time finding clean water. So much a hard time. I died, I think, like on the public server, I died like 10 times. I would say like 3 to 4 of those times was just from dehydration or sickness because I drank from a river or whatever.
Red and I found a solution for that, but it wasn't a necessarily a satisfactory solution. We started finding these big huge like squares of there's a name for them. I don't know what the term is for them.
In the industry, it's called a tote. Those would be 250
Oh.
gallon totes.
Big 250-gallon totes, which you can drink from and drink your fill from, and it's clean water, but you can't fill containers from it. So we had to find stuff to purify our water. I think at one point we found some water filter bottles, so we were able to purify water that way. But as far as
Ooh.
just straight up drinkable, fillable, instantly drinkable water, the only thing that we ran into were those totes.
No, that was the case. And there's those fountains that look like they may be drinkable. And I learned when I was in a public server the hard way that yeah, those are no good. They're getting sick within 5 minutes. And we all drank from the river. And even though we popped vitamins and thought we were good, we all three of us got sick.
Moving on to one of the last pieces of information we want to talk about is the infected balance. I felt like the amount of infected in some of the smaller towns sometimes bordered on a little bit too many, but I never had trouble dealing with them overall.
Nope, it was anemic, in my opinion. Could be turned up by maybe 30%. Some people may cry about that as being a little bit too harsh, but we only got into a few little chingasos when Dimension and I were in town. That was because we were firing off big boomsticks and not doing it in a smart way. But again, it's you just in vanilla, you just find a car to jump up on top of, and then you take out your 22 and pink, 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 pink.
Well, even then, when we were in these big towns, firing off shotgun blasts and loud weapons and all of that stuff, yes, we were attracting a lot of infected, and we were having to destroy a lot of infected, but it also didn't seem like a lot for a large town. It still seemed a little bit sparse, in my opinion, especially like I said and Red said, since we were using loud weapons, heavy rounds, we should have been pulling a lot. Again, it still was a lot, but felt to me like it wasn't quite enough.
So I gather from both what you guys said is that it wasn't a problem until one of you jumped on a car and said, "This is my boomstick,"
No,
and
no,
then everybody came out.
no. It wasn't a problem until someone said, "I'm not going to use my loud weapon like an idiot," and I was like, "Bam!" like that. and then jumped up on a car.
Uh, all right. We're going to go ahead from one person to the other and wrap up our overall views of Greene County that we've talked about it. I know I said in the very beginning that I think Greene County was middle of the road, and I still stick to that, honestly. I think that Greene County, by replacing the used vanilla assets with some of the custom assets that they probably will make over time, I think that this map will start to stand alone on its own because we don't have a lot of American made location maps. And I look forward to seeing that. I think overall, the loot economy could definitely be balanced a little bit better looking at the sling bags here. But also, yeah, you're right. The infected probably could be turned up to make it a bit more difficult. And think it might be a bug not filling from the containers, but if it's not, I definitely feel that as a downside, and I would like that changed. But it's just like one notch below being good, in my opinion.
I really liked it. It was definitely an interesting change of pace for me to play something that wasn't official DayZ map. It was very nice being able to read the road signs and be able to tell you guys where I was at, so we could actually meet up and connect and actually do something. It does have its little weird things and weird issues, quote unquote issues. The filling the water thing, like you cited. Maybe I'm just unlucky with the wolves, and then the weird thing with the loot not seeming like it's spread out enough. But overall, I'm excited to explore that map a little bit more and try to learn it better, and eventually get the equipment I need to check out the military bases, because those seem like pretty cool POIs.
And I would say that I was very pleasantly surprised to try a new map on its kind of grand release. I know that there's been some closed testing over the years, but and it wasn't half-assed. It was I was having to look really close to find details that I thought were inconsistent or unfinished. Like Dimension said, we went looking around for things that I normally see that are buggy on maps where tree roots are sticking out into the air or rocks are floating. There was absolutely none of that. Um, Contrary to what you were saying, Dump, I think that the way the water's done is actually good. You have to think about it a different way. So now you're reliant on knowing where those totes are to drink, and then using a combination of chlorine or those filter bottles, which there are more of the filter bottles in the Greene County economy than there are in the vanilla Sonaros, for so they kind of up that a little bit to make that your source of water. So it makes that the water a point of contention rather than some of the other things in the game. Kind of on the downside, it is a big green map. It would have been nice to see some of the areas of forest have some meadows or glades of some kind that were open so that you could go and build a base in the middle of a line. It's pretty tough with the trees all being close. Chopping them down building, now all of a sudden you've got trees all right in the middle of your base. So that would be nice to see just from a longer term. And then overall, I thought the loot economy, with the few exceptions noted, was nice. It was refreshing to see that it was a little bit tighter and simpler. You weren't going to be fully kitted um, with all your military gear within the first 3 hours of gameplay. It actually looks like it's pretty tough to get really high tier military. So like I said, I was very happy and 10 out of 10 would highly recommend.
Well, that was our impressions of Greene County, a mod map made by Hellmaker 2. If you want to learn more about it, the link will be down in the description below. And join me in thanking Dimension 119 and Red Falcon for always being here and being part of the podcast. It's all for now.
See you in another dimension.
Cheers, everybody.